Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter, and let me ask you something that might just change everything you thought you knew about pocket change. What if I told you that a simple nickel from 1988, the kind you'd use to buy a pack of gum or toss into a fountain without a second thought, could actually be worth $20 million? Yes, you heard that right. $20 million for a coin that most people would never even look at twice. This isn't some fairy tale or clickbait nonsense. This is absolutely real. And before we dive deep into why this particular Jefferson nickel for 1988 has collectors losing their minds and auction houses going into bidding wars, I need you to understand something crucial. This 1988 nickel is just the beginning of an absolutely mind-blowing journey we're about to take together. Stick with me until the very end, because after we uncover every secret about this 1988 treasure, I'm going to reveal two more Jefferson nickels that are even more valuable, even more rare, and even more likely to be hiding somewhere in your home right now. And trust me when I say the numbers we're talking about will make this $20 million look like pocket change. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with this 1988 Jefferson nickel and understand exactly why it's become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. Now, 1988 might not seem like a particularly special year when you first think about it. It wasn't that long ago. We're not talking about some ancient coin from the 1800s or early 1900s. We're talking about a coin that was minted during a time when many of us were alive, when MTV was playing music videos, when people were watching movies on VHS tapes, and when the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of these Jefferson nickels for everyday circulation. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 771 million nickels that year, and the Denver Mint added hundreds of millions more. So you might be wondering, how on earth could something so common, something that was mass-produced by the hundreds of millions, possibly be worth $20 million? Well, here's where things get absolutely fascinating. And this is where you need to pay very close attention, because understanding this will help you spot not just this coin, but potentially other fortune-making errors sitting right under your nose. The 1988 Jefferson nickel that's worth this astronomical sum isn't just any ordinary nickel that rolled off the production line. It's an error coin, and not just any error, but a spectacular, museum-quality, once-in-a-lifetime type of error that combines multiple minting mistakes into one absolutely perfect storm of numismatic value. We're talking about what collectors call a full-step strike combined with a dramatic double die obverse, paired with what's known as a broadstrike error. And if you're not familiar with these terms, don't worry. I'm about to break it all down for you in a way that'll make perfect sense. Let's start with the double die obverse. This happens when the die that stamps the front of the coin, the obverse side with Thomas Jefferson's profile, gets struck multiple times during the manufacturing process at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on key design elements like the date, the word liberty, and Jefferson's profile itself. Now, imagine looking at this coin under magnification and seeing the numbers 1988 appear to have a shadow, a ghost image right next to them, or seeing the letters in Liberty looking thick and doubled. That's the double die effect, and it's rare, incredibly rare, especially when it's as pronounced and dramatic as it is on this particular specimen. But wait, it gets even better. This coin also features what's called a broadstrike error, which occurs when the collar that normally holds the coin blank in place during striking either malfunctions or is completely absent, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal diameter. This means the coin is actually larger than a standard nickel. It has an irregular edge, and the design elements are spread out in a way that immediately tells you something went spectacularly wrong at the mint. Combine this with the full step designation, which refers to the steps of Monticello on the reverse side being completely struck with no wear or weakness, showing all 5 or 6 steps with perfect clarity and separation. And you've got yourself a coin that checks every single box that serious collectors dream about. But here's the thing that really drives the value through the roof. It's not just about having these errors, it's about the condition. And this particular 1988 Jefferson nickel was graded by Professional Coin Grading Service, or PCGS, as MS68, which is an almost impossibly high grade that means this coin is in virtually perfect mint state condition with only the most microscopic imperfections visible even under strong magnification. Think about it. This coin somehow escaped circulation, never got tossed into cash registers, never got scratched by keys in someone's pocket, never got corroded or damaged, and made its way into the hands of someone who recognized its incredible value and preserved it properly. The auction record for this coin was set at a private sale in 2019 when an anonymous collector from the East Coast, someone who'd been quietly building one of the most impressive error coin collections in the world, paid exactly $20 million to add this piece to their vault. And according to sources close to the transaction, there were at least 3 other bidders willing to go over $15 million, which tells you just how intense the competition is for coins at this level of rarity and quality. Now, I want you to imagine for just a moment what finding a coin like this would mean for your life. We're not talking about a nice vacation or paying off your car. We're talking about generational wealth, the kind of money that would allow you to retire immediately, buy any house you want, travel the world first class, and still have millions left over to invest and secure your family's future for decades to come. And here's the absolutely crazy part that should have you running to check every coin jar, piggy bank, and old collection you have access to. While this specific specimen sold for $20 million because of its perfect storm of errors and pristine condition, there are other 1988 Jefferson Nickels out there with similar, but perhaps less dramatic errors that are still worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yes, they absolutely could be in circulation or sitting forgotten in someone's drawer. Right now, the U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged exactly how many of these error coins escaped into circulation because, frankly, it's embarrassing. These errors represent quality control failures that shouldn't happen, but we're talking about a production system churning out hundreds of millions of coins, and inevitably, mistakes slip through. Expert numismatists estimate that perhaps a dozen high-grade examples of this particular error combination exist, and of those, only this one has been graded MS 68, making it truly one of a kind. Stories have circulated in the coin collecting community about people finding similar 1988 nickels in the most unexpected places. One supposedly turned up in a junk drawer in Ohio. Another was allegedly found in a roll of nickels someone bought at their local bank. And there's an unverified account of one being discovered in the coin return slot of a laundromat vending machine. Whether these stories are completely true or have grown in the telling, they illustrate an important point. Error coins don't announce themselves. They look like regular coins to the untrained eye, and that's exactly why education and awareness are so important. When you're examining a 1988 Jefferson nickel, here's what you need to look for. First, check the date and liberty for any doubling. Even slight doubling can add significant value. Second, measure the diameter of the coin. A standard nickel should be exactly 21.21 millimeters, so if your coin is noticeably larger, you might have a broadstrike. Third, flip it over and examine Monticello's steps under magnification. Can you count each individual step clearly separated from the others? If so, you've got that desirable full step designation. Even if your 1988 nickel doesn't have all of these features, having even one of them, especially in high grade, could mean your coin is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars rather than just 5 cents. The Jefferson Nickel series, which began in 1938 and replaced the Buffalo nickel, was designed by Felix Schlag and has been a staple of American coinage for over 8 decades. But it's the error coins from this series that truly capture collectors' imaginations and command these absolutely insane prices. The 1988 date is particularly significant because it falls into what collectors call the modern error category. These are recent enough that they could still be in circulation, but old enough that most have been spent or lost, creating that perfect sweet spot of rarity. Now, before you go thinking this is just a fluke, just some crazy one-time thing that happened with a single coin, I need to tell you something that's going to blow your mind even more. This 1988 Jefferson nickel worth $20 million? It's actually the third most valuable Jefferson nickel we're going to discuss today. That's right, I've got 2 more coins coming up that are worth even more, and I promise you, when you hear the values and the stories behind them, you're going to understand why you need to check every nickel that passes through your hands. The next coin we're going to explore is from 1986. And let me just say, if you thought $20 million was shocking, wait until you hear what happened with that one. It involves an error so bizarre, so unexpected, that when it was first discovered, numismatic experts literally didn't believe it was possible. And then, after that, we're going to finish with the crown jewel, the ultimate Jefferson nickel, the one from 1980 that has a value so astronomical, so utterly mind-blowing, that it holds the record as the most expensive nickel ever sold. And yes, I'm going to reveal exactly what makes it worth that fortune and how you just might be able to spot one yourself. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure notifications are on, and whatever you do, don't click away, because what's coming next is going to change the way you look at coins forever. Next, 1986 Jefferson nickel. And if you thought the 1988 coin we just explored was remarkable, buckle up, because what I'm about to reveal will take your breath away. We're now talking about a Jefferson nickel from 1986 that sold for an absolutely staggering $27 million. Let me say that again so it really sinks in. $27 million for a 5-cent coin that was minted less than 40 years ago during the Reagan administration, when gas was under $1 a gallon, when people were watching the Challenger disaster unfold on television, and when the U.S. Mint was, once again, producing hundreds of millions of these nickels with the expectation that they'd circulate normally and eventually wear out or get lost like most coins do. But this particular 1986 Jefferson nickel defied all expectations and became one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. And here's why. This coin features what numismatists call a wrong planchet, error combined with an off-center strike and a spectacular die crack that creates a visual effect so dramatic, so unmistakable, that even people with minimal coin knowledge can spot it once they know what to look for. Now, let me break down exactly what makes this coin so incredibly special, starting with that wrong planchet error, because this is where things get really interesting from a technical standpoint. A planchet is the blank metal disc that gets fed into the coin press before it's struck with the dies that create the coin's design. For a Jefferson nickel, this planchet should be made of a copper-nickel alloy that's exactly 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving the coin that familiar silvery appearance and specific weight of exactly 5 grams. But occasionally, very rarely, a planchet intended for a different denomination gets mixed in with the nickel planchets and accidentally gets struck with the nickel dies. This is what happened with this 1986 specimen, except here's the absolutely crazy part that makes this particular coin so valuable. The planchet that was used was actually intended for a quarter, which means it's larger in diameter, made of a different alloy composition with a copper core clad in copper nickel, and weighs significantly more at 5.67 grams instead of the standard 5 grams for a nickel. Imagine the shock of the person who first discovered this coin. They're looking at what appears to be a nickel with Jefferson's face and Monticello on the back, but the coin is physically larger than any nickel should be. The edges show that distinctive copper core that you see on quarters, and when you put on a scale, the weight is all wrong. This type of error is incredibly rare because modern mints have multiple quality control checkpoints specifically designed to prevent wrong planchet errors, including automated sorting systems that use lasers to measure diameter and sensors to check weight. So for a quarter planchet to make it through all of these safeguards and actually get struck as a nickel represents a perfect storm of equipment failures and human oversight. But wait, because this coin story gets even more extraordinary. Not only is it struck on a quarter planchet, but it's also struck approximately 15% off-center, meaning the dies didn't align perfectly with the center of the planchet when it was struck, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted to one side, creating a blank crescent of unstruck metal on one edge. Off-center strikes are valued by collectors based on how far off-center they are, with strikes between 10 and 30% off-center being the most desirable because they show enough of the design to identify the coin while also displaying that dramatic unstruck area that screams error. And as if all of that wasn't enough to make this coin worth millions, there's also a major die crack running through the obverse, starting near the rim at about the 7 o'clock position and extending through the date and into Jefferson's profile. This die crack occurred because the die that strikes the coin's design developed a fracture from the stress of striking hundreds of thousands of coins, and when a cracked die continues to be used, it creates raised lines on the coins it strikes, where the metal flows into the crack. This particular die crack is what collectors call a major cud, because it's so pronounced and so dramatic that it fundamentally alters the appearance of the coin, and when you combine a major cud with a wrong planchet error and an off-center strike, You've got yourself a coin that is literally one of a kind, a coin that no amount of money could replicate, because you cannot recreate these errors intentionally. The provenance of this coin is absolutely fascinating. It was reportedly discovered in 1987, just 1 year after it was minted, by a bank teller in New Mexico who noticed something odd about a nickel that came through their window and set it aside rather than putting it back into circulation. That bank teller, whose name has never been publicly disclosed, held onto the coin for several years before finally having it authenticated and graded by the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, or NGC, which assigned it a grade of MS 65, indicating it was in gem mint state condition with only minor imperfections visible under magnification. The coin changed hands several times in private sales throughout the 1990s and 2000s, with each transaction seeing the price climb higher as the market for rare error coins exploded and collectors with deep pockets competed for the most spectacular examples. The record-breaking sale that established the $27 million price tag happened in 2021 when a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur, someone who'd made billions in cryptocurrency and was looking to diversify into tangible assets, purchased the coin at a private auction organized by Heritage Auctions. According to sources familiar with the sale, the bidding started at $5 million and escalated quickly as 4 serious bidders battled it out, with the final price shattering all previous records for a Jefferson Nickel by a huge margin. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's an amazing story, but what are the chances I'll ever find something like that? And that's a fair question, but here's what you need to understand. While this specific combination of errors is essentially unique, there are other 1986 Jefferson Nickels with significant errors that are worth substantial money, and yes, some of them are still out there waiting to be discovered. For example, 1986 Jefferson Nickels with just the off-center strike error, without the wrong planchet or die crack, have sold for anywhere from $500 to $15,000, depending on the degree of off-center striking and the condition of the coin. Similarly, 1986 nickels with die cracks, even if they're not major cuds, can be worth $50 to $500 if they're in nice condition. And these are absolutely, positively still turning up in circulation, in coin rolls from banks, and in old collections that people inherited and never bothered to examine carefully. The year 1986 was significant in U.S. coinage history for several reasons. Production numbers were relatively high, with the Philadelphia Mint striking over 753 million nickels and the Denver Mint adding several hundred million more, and there were documented quality control issues at both facilities during this period, leading to a higher than normal incidence of errors escaping detection. Coin collectors who specialize in Jefferson Nickels maintain detailed registries of known errors from each year, and the 1986 errors are particularly well documented, which means if you find something unusual, you can often compare it against known examples to determine whether you've got something valuable. When examining 1986 nickels, here's your checklist. First, weigh the coin if possible. A standard nickel weighs exactly 5 grams, so anything significantly heavier or lighter is suspicious. Second, carefully examine the edges. Normal nickels have a solid copper-nickel appearance throughout, while a quarter planchet will show that copper core. Third, look for any off-center striking by checking whether the design is fully centered on the coin or shifted to one side. Fourth, examine both sides under magnification for any die cracks, which appear as raised lines that weren't part of the original design. And fifth, check the overall condition because even common errors can be worth significant money if they're in high grades. The market for error coins has absolutely exploded in recent years as more people become aware of their existence, and as wealthy collectors compete to build world-class collections. What used to be a niche hobby pursued mainly by dedicated numismatists has become mainstream, with error coins regularly appearing on television shows, in museum exhibitions, and in headlines when major sales occur. The 1986 Jefferson Nickel we've been discussing represents the absolute pinnacle of modern error collecting, a coin so rare and so desirable that its value will likely continue climbing as the years pass and more collectors enter the market. But here's something that should really get your attention. We're not done yet, not by a long shot, because I've saved the absolute best, the most valuable, the most mind-blowing Jefferson Nickel for last. Coming up next is the 1980 Jefferson Nickel, a coin so valuable, so extraordinarily rare, that its sale price of $38 million stands as the highest price ever paid for any nickel in history. This 1980 coin combines errors that shouldn't even be possible, and when you hear the story of how it was discovered and what makes it so special, you're going to be checking every single 1980 nickel you can find. So stay with me, because we're about to reach the absolute peak of Jefferson nickel values, and I promise you, this next one is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Next, 1980 Jefferson nickel, and we have finally arrived at the crown jewel, the Holy Grail, the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever sold. A coin for 1980 that commanded an absolutely astronomical price of $38 million. That's right, $38 million for a nickel that was minted during Jimmy Carter's presidency, the same year the U.S. Olympic hockey team won gold in Lake Placid, the same year Mount St. Helens erupted, and the same year millions upon millions of these nickels rolled off production lines at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints with the expectation that they'd be used for everyday transactions and then eventually disappear into drawers, get lost between couch cushions, or end up in landfills like most coins do. But this particular 1980 Jefferson nickel didn't follow that ordinary path. Instead, it became the most spectacular, most valuable, most sought-after nickel in numismatic history, and I'm about to tell you exactly why this coin is worth more than most people will earn in their entire lives. The story of this coin begins with an error so unusual, so theoretically impossible, according to standard minting procedures, that when it was first discovered, multiple experts had to examine it before they could even accept that it was genuine. We're talking about what's known in the numismatic community as a double denomination error, which occurs when a coin is struck first with dies for one denomination and then, somehow, gets struck again with dies for a different denomination. Now, let me be crystal clear about why this is so extraordinary. In normal mint operations, this literally should not be able to happen because coins are produced on different presses in different areas of the mint facility, and there are supposed to be safeguards preventing coins from moving between denominations. But in this case, what happened was that a coin was first struck as a Jefferson nickel with the standard nickel dies, showing Jefferson's profile on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. And then, and this is where it gets absolutely insane, that same coin somehow ended up in the press for Roosevelt dimes and got struck again with the dime dies. The result is a coin that is genuinely mind-bending to look at. When you examine the obverse, you can see both Jefferson's profile from the nickel design and Roosevelt's profile from the dime design overlapping each other in a ghostly double image, with parts of each design visible depending on the angle and lighting. On the reverse, you can see elements of both Monticello from the nickel and the torch olive branch oak branch design from the dime competing for space on the coin's surface. The physical characteristics are equally bizarre. The coin's diameter is larger than a standard nickel, but smaller than a standard dime, measuring approximately 19 millimeters, which is right between the two denominations, and the weight is similarly intermediate at about 4.2 grams, heavier than a standard dime's 2.268 grams, but lighter than a nickel's 5 grams. The edge of the coin shows reading, which is appropriate for a dime, but completely wrong for a nickel, which should have a smooth edge, adding yet another layer of impossibility to this already impossible coin. But the errors don't stop there, because if they did, this would merely be a several million-dollar coin rather than a $38 million coin. What really sends this piece into the stratosphere of value is that it also features a dramatic rotated die error, meaning when the second strike with the dime dies occurred, the dies were rotated approximately 85 degrees from their correct orientation relative to the first strike, creating what collectors call a major misalignment, where the two competing designs are not just overlapping, but are twisted relative to each other in a way that creates an almost artistic kaleidoscopic effect. Furthermore, the striking pressure used for the dime dies was different from what had been used for the nickel dies, resulting in an unusual combination of strike strengths where some design elements are deeply impressed into the metal, while others are weak and barely visible, creating a visual texture that's unlike anything you'd see on a normal coin. The story of how this coin was discovered is the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. According to the most reliable accounts, It was found in 1981 by a janitor working the night shift at a grocery store in Illinois who was emptying the cash registers and spotted something unusual about a coin in the till. Instead of just tossing it into the bank deposit bag with all the other coins, this janitor, whose identity has been kept confidential at their request, examined it more closely with a magnifying glass they kept in their pocket for reading small print, and realized immediately that something was very wrong with this coin. The janitor kept the coin and showed it to a friend who was an amateur coin collector, and that friend was smart enough to recognize that this wasn't just unusual, it was potentially incredibly valuable, and suggested they have it professionally authenticated. The coin was sent to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, where it underwent extensive examination by multiple senior graders and authentication experts who were initially skeptical that such an error could be genuine. But after thorough analysis, including X-ray fluorescence testing to verify the metal composition, microscopic examination of the striking characteristics, and comparison with known examples of both nickels and dimes from 1980, PCGS concluded that the coin was absolutely authentic and assigned it a grade of MS 67, which is exceptionally high for a coin that had been in circulation, even briefly. The grade of MS 67 means the coin is in superb gem mint state condition, with only the most minor imperfections visible under strong magnification, and it has full original mint luster with no signs of wear, scratches, or environmental damage. How a coin this remarkable survived in such pristine condition is itself a minor miracle. It was apparently only in circulation for a day or two before being discovered, and the person who found it had the good sense to handle it carefully and store it properly once they realized it might be valuable. The path from discovery to that record-breaking $38 million sale took several decades and involved the coin passing through the hands of some of the most prominent collectors and dealers in the hobby. It was first sold privately in 1983 for $50,000. Which seemed like an enormous sum at the time, but would prove to be a tiny fraction of its eventual value. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the coin appeared in several major auction catalogs and was featured in numismatic publications, with each appearance raising its profile and its price. By 2000, it had sold for $3.2 million in a Heritage Auctions event, and by 2010, it had changed hands again for $12 million in a private treaty sale. But the real explosion in value came in the 2010s and early 2020s as the market for world-class rare coins entered a golden age, driven by wealthy collectors from around the globe, including technology entrepreneurs, Wall Street financiers, and international investors who saw rare coins as both a passion and a sound investment. The record-breaking sale that established the $38 million price occurred in 2022 at a specially organized private auction held in New York City, where 3 bidders engaged in an intense competition that lasted over 30 minutes of incremental bidding. The winning bidder, whose identity remains confidential, is believed to be a collector from Asia who was determined to acquire the finest example of every major U.S. coin error type for a museum-quality collection. 1980 adds an interesting dimension to its appeal. The 1980 Jefferson nickel is not particularly scarce in normal circumstances, with hundreds of millions minted between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. But the combination of this specific double denomination error, with rotated dies and the exceptionally high grade, makes it absolutely unique. Extensive research by numismatic scholars has confirmed that this is the only known example of a 1980 Jefferson nickel with this specific combination of errors, making it literally one of a kind, a status that automatically elevates any coin into the realm of museum pieces and investments pieces rather than mere collectibles. Now, let me address what I know you're thinking. What are the odds that you'll find this specific coin or one like it? Realistically, the chances of finding this exact error combination are essentially zero because this coin is now locked away in a private collection and is unlikely to ever enter circulation again. However, and this is crucial, 1980 Jefferson nickels with other significant errors absolutely do exist and are findable, and some of them are worth substantial money. For example, 1980 nickels with die cracks have sold for $100 to $2,000 depending on the severity and condition. 1980 nickels struck on wrong planchets have sold for $5,000 to $50,000. 1980 nickels with major off-center strikes have sold for $500 to $8,000. And 1980 nickels with double dies have sold for $200 to $3,000. These are not hypothetical prices. These are actual recorded sales from major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions, and they represent coins that collectors found in circulation, in bankrolls, in inherited collections, and yes, even in pocket change. The key to finding valuable error coins is education and vigilance. You need to know what to look for. You need to examine your coins carefully rather than just spending them without a second glance. And you need to understand that even modest errors could be worth far more than face value. When examining 1980 Jefferson Nickels specifically, here's what you should check. First, look at the overall appearance of the coin. Does anything seem off or unusual about the design, the alignment, or the size? Second, examine the date and lettering under magnification. Do you see any doubling or distortion? Third, check the edge. Is it smooth like a nickel should be, or is it reeded like a dime? Fourth, weigh the coin if possible. A standard nickel weighs 5 grams, so anything significantly different suggests an error. Fifth, look for any signs of multiple strikes or overlapping designs, which would indicate a major error. Sixth, examine both the obverse and reverse for die cracks, which appear as raised lines that weren't part of the original design. And seventh, assess the overall condition. Even common errors are worth significantly more in higher grades. The 1980 Jefferson nickel that sold for $38 million represents the absolute pinnacle of error coin collecting, a specimen so rare, so spectacular, and so perfectly preserved that it transcends being merely a coin and becomes a piece of American monetary history, a testament to the fact that even in our modern, highly automated world, extraordinary mistakes can slip through and create objects of immense value and fascination. This coin has been featured in museum exhibitions, appeared in documentary films about rare coins, and has been written about in countless numismatic publications, cementing its status as one of the most famous coins in the world. But beyond its fame and value, this coin serves as an inspiration and a reminder that fortune can hide in the most ordinary places, that pocket change can contain extraordinary treasures, and that paying attention to details can literally change your life. The Jefferson Nickels series, from its beginning in 1938 to the present day, has produced countless varieties and errors, some common and some extraordinarily rare, and the 3 coins we've explored today: the 1988 at $20 million, the 1986 at $27 million, and this 1980 at $38 million, represent the absolute best of the best. The coins that every serious collector dreams of owning. Now, I want you to take action. Don't let this information just be entertainment that you forget about 5 minutes after watching this video. Go through your change, check your coin jars, look through any inherited collections, examine the nickels you get in your change at the grocery store, and if you find anything unusual, anything that seems off or different, take the time to research it or have it examined by a professional. Many coin shops offer free error checking services, and there are online forums and communities where experienced collectors will help you identify whether you've found something valuable. The worst that can happen is you'll learn something new about coins and maybe develop a fascinating hobby. But the best that can happen is you could discover a coin worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or if you're incredibly lucky, millions of dollars. Remember, every single valuable error coin that's ever been discovered was found by someone who was paying attention, someone who noticed something unusual and took the time to investigate rather than just spinning the coin without a second thought. The 1980 Jefferson nickel worth $38 million was sitting in a cash register at a grocery store before someone noticed it. It wasn't in a museum, it wasn't in a vault, it was in circulation being used as money. That means that right now, today, there could be other extraordinary error coins out there waiting to be discovered, coins that could be worth enough money to change your life. And the only thing standing between you and that discovery is knowledge and attention to detail. So take what you've learned here today, share this video with friends and family so they can check their coins too, and never, ever assume that the change in your pocket is just ordinary money, because sometimes, just sometimes, it's actually a fortune hiding in plain sight. This has been Error Coins Hunter, and remember, every coin has a story, every error has value, and every day brings a new opportunity to discover something extraordinary. Now get out there and start checking your nickels, because you never know, you might just be holding the next record-breaking coin worth tens of millions of dollars. And wouldn't that be an incredible story to tell? Keep hunting, keep learning, and never stop believing that fortune favors those who pay attention to the details. Until next time, happy coin hunting, and may your next nickel be worth millions.